All right. All right. Welcome. Welcome to the David Carmena Show. I hope everyone had a great weekend. And, you know, we have a topic here tonight. The topic is going to be a little bit daunting. We're talking about the debt ceiling. We're going to talk about let me turn this down. We're going to talk about, get an understanding on what's going on with the debt ceiling, how it affects us, because it is super important that we understand this. The debt ceiling and the debt limit that is going to be in Congress, talked about in Congress over the next week and actually throughout the next month, because every day as we get closer and closer to the beginning of the next month, it is more and more prevalent that we get this right. So having a thorough understanding of the debt ceiling is super important, because it is going to affect you if they don't get it right. So let's get straight to it. I have a little video here that talks about the debt ceiling, kind of a background and understand how we got there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to dig deeper into it, and we're going to see how it affects us as a regular
The
investor
US
as
has a
well as
weird
business
thing
owner.
called the debt ceiling, which is just a limit on how much debt the country can take on. If the national debt reaches that limit, the US might not be able to pay its investors. The US regularly comes close to hitting it, but the government always ends up raising it. Until 2011, when it almost didn't. After that, the US was downgraded for the first time due to, quote, political risks. Since then, Congress and the president have had to raise it 7 more times. It's becoming an almost annual task. And of course, it always goes super swell.
The entire basis of the Republican strategy is we're going to shut down the government
Shout out
or
Barack.
cause economic chaos if we don't get 100% of what we want.
This isn't some damn game.
My Republican friends need to stop playing Russian roulette.
Russian roulette with the economy.
In the last 20 years, the US has borrowed more and more money. The national debt is at an all-time high. But how should we feel about this debt? And what happens if we don't pay it back? The US national debt is nearing $29 trillion with a capital T. Depending on when you watch this, it might already be there. It's best not to look at it as a number, but instead as a comparison to the size of the economy. You'll see the US takes on more debt when the country spends a lot, because of wars or because of investments needed during recessions and now pandemics. And the department in charge of all this is the US Treasury. They collect taxes and spend them to fund the government. And for the record, it's Congress and the president who decide how much taxes should be and where the money should be spent. The Treasury just handles the flow of money. But for essentially ever, they approve more spending than they bring in with taxes. So the Treasury has to make up that difference by taking on debt. And it does that by selling bonds. They can vary, but generally it works like this. You buy a $1,000 30-year bond at a locked-in 2% interest rate. Every year, the Treasury sends you $20, the 2% interest you've earned. And after 30 years, you can cash out the bond and get your $1,000 back. It's a win-win situation. The US gets money to fund the government, and you make some profit on a safe investment. More than a third of these bonds, and therefore the total US debt, are owned by Americans and American companies. Investors, and also banks, local governments, and even pension funds, keep their money in bonds. And the largest part is owned by the federal government. The federal government owns part of the federal government's debt. The money for Social Security is actually kept in bonds. So is the money for Medicare and federal pensions. The Federal Reserve has bonds too. Foreign investors only own a quarter of the US debt. And while Chinese investors used to have the largest share, Japanese investors actually own more now. They own around 4% of all US debt. And it is a lot of debt. Of all the developed countries, the US has the 4th largest debt compared to the size of the economy. So is this bad?
The really, really frustrating answer is we don't know.
Debt has pros and cons. One question is, what are you doing with the debt?
When you're in an economic recession or an emergency, not only should you borrow, you should borrow a lot. But what you shouldn't do is borrow when your economy is strong and the political inconvenience of paying for things is too high.
Another really important question is, what are interest rates? In recent years, interest rates have been very low. That tends to make it easier to borrow and to sustain that borrowing. Where we are now doesn't make me, as of now, very nervous.
I worry about the debt a lot more than he does.
While all countries take on debt, only these two have debt ceilings. Denmark's, however, is kept so high, they're not going to come close to hitting it. Unlike the United States, where the government is constantly having to raise the debt ceiling to pay for spending they already approved.
That's the big problem with the debt limit, is it's internally contradictory. The government passes a law that says you have to spend 10. It passes a law saying you can only collect 8 in taxes. And then it passes another law saying you're not allowed to borrow 2.
If the US does hit the debt ceiling, it would mean the Treasury couldn't issue any more bonds, so no more debt revenue. Taxes would still be coming in, but that's not enough to cover all these responsibilities. So maybe they stop paying federal employees or stop spending money for programs. But at some point, they won't be able to pay the interest to these investors or cash out Social Security bonds. That's called a default. It's never happened yet.
You couldn't do more to sabotage your financial system than default.
Interest rates could rise based on a reassessment that the United States was considerably riskier than people had thought before. When government bond interest rates go up, that usually means that other interest rates are going up.
If you borrow for anything, whether it's for a dishwasher, a car, college, or your credit card, that's going to become more costly. We're going to lose jobs. Wages won't go up as high.
We could be like these countries and just not have a debt limit, or have one so high it's never a threat to the economy. Because if Congress and the president really want to take on less debt, they can change the tax system or reduce spending.
The debt limit does make sense if you are a functioning Congress. You're saying we need to put in place some policy to make sure that we don't borrow more than we mean to, or we stop and we pause and we check on the borrowing. That certainly isn't how it is working.
And the simplest thing would just be to repeal it and be like almost every other country in the world.
Even if the US never actually defaults on its debt, just the mere political fights and will they or won't they unease could make the United States a less desirable place to invest.
It's long been seen as this is kind of the safest asset that you can invest in. And so it's given the US a lot of advantages. But the more our political system is so polarized and dysfunctional, the more that it becomes a little bit questioned of whether the US should have the incredible advantage that it has thus far.
All right. So let's talk about this. I want to look at kind of the history of the debt. Now, it actually is nothing new, guys. It is nothing new. In 1917, the Second Liberty Bonds Act of 1917 established that the debt limit is to give the U.S. Treasury more flexibility during World War I. It allowed the Treasury to issue long-term bonds, but overall amount was capped. It was capped. So we needed the debt we issued bonds to raise capital for World War I. That's what it was all about. That's kind of what started it. Now, in 1939 to 1941, as World War II approached, Congress expanded the type of debt that fell under the limit. Okay, so we expanded it, and they effectively created an aggregated limit that's what we're familiar with today. So in 1939 to 1941, we expanded it. Now in 1950 to 1970, that's where we had numerous increases of the debt limit. Okay, so 1950 to 1970, we raised it over and over again, numerous increases. Due to economic growth, we started spending more in the military. We had the Korean and Vietnam wars, so we needed some more funding for that, and social programs such as the Great Society. So there were a bunch of social programs that were enacted during that time frame, and so over the 20 years or so, we raised the debt limit often. Now in 1980 to 1990, the debt limit became a political bargaining chip. That's when they started playing politics with it, with lawmakers often approaching the as a conditional debt limit. They wanted to limit the raise of growth of the economy, kind of reducing government spending. That's when it started becoming, in the 80s and 90s, that's when it started becoming that political back and forth that we see today. Okay. Before, again, there was raising money for basically the war and to overcome our economic condition. In the 2000s, the debt limit was raised several times by both President George W. Bush and President Obama. The financial costs of the Iraq war, we had another war, we have Afghanistan, in the 2008 financial crisis, and the economic stimulus measures. So in 2000, we raised it again. Now, in that chart that was shown in the film, you can see how kind of when we had a war, the debt limit kind of spiked a little bit. And so you can understand that. You can understand that, we are fighting the enemy. We needed to raise funds, so we needed to increase the debt limit to do so. Now in 2011, that's when it kind of came to a head. The U.S. faced serious debt ceiling crisis. Congress debated over whether to raise the limit. Now that's when the brother was in there. That's when Obama was in there, and they had there was the first ever time that the U.S. credit was downgraded, and Standard & Poor's, they downgraded the AAA credit of the United States to AA, which caused, again, financial ramifications. But we didn't default necessarily, but it was the first time that the U.S. was ever downgraded in their credit rating. That was in 2013. 2015 to 2019, the debt limit was suspended multiple times during this period, effectively allowing the government to borrow as needed. So again, 2015 to 2019, we have precedents where we suspended the debt limit, allowing the U.S. to borrow. In 2021, that's where it was the September 2021 was the last update. We had the U.S. was facing another potential debt crisis. The Treasury, again, took extraordinary measures, kind of what we're in now, so that we can extend that debt ceiling out. And then in the end, of course, it was raised. It was raised again because of the pandemic. Now, the debt should be raised with extreme circumstances. If we have a pandemic like we're just getting out of, and no one has the ability to work or the ability to, sustain their family, their businesses, you should think about raising the debt ceiling. So it is okay to look at options where, or have situations where we should raise the debt ceiling. But it's always been kind of a political football back and forth. Thank you, Christopher, for showing up. I appreciate you. I appreciate the 199 and being in the chat. Thank you again. Appreciate you, brother. Christopher Williams is a friend of the channel. He always shows up to David Carmena still in the office, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you dropping by. We're talking about the debt limit, the debt ceiling, we're going to just do like a one-on-one on it. We're going to dive deeper tomorrow and the next couple of days, because as we get closer and closer to June, maybe June 1st, definitely the beginning of June, it is not looking good. So we're going to do a one-on-one, kind of do a level set, so everyone kind of understand where we are, what is the debt ceiling, and why that raising that limit is so important. We just covered a kind of a brief history of the debt ceiling. Now, again, the debt limit was started. We needed in 2017, we needed to issue bonds to do the initial raise of the debt ceiling and raise capital for the wars. And most of the time when you have those spikes, it was to raise capital for a war. The last big spike is the pandemic. We needed to raise the limit so that we can pay for all of the stimulus packages and all of the economic stimulus that needed to be out there so that we can overcome and power through this pandemic. So raising the debt limit, it shouldn't really be a political football, but unfortunately, too often it is. What a lot of people don't realize is that what can happen if Congress and the president does not act by the first of the month. We're talking about less than 30 days, and the government will not be able to pay its bills potentially. Now, maybe Yellen can do something. There's been some theories out there where the Treasury can just, print a new bond, or there's some amendment talk. That is extreme measures. The better thing to do is for Congress, I'm talking about the House and the Democrats, to do their job. Have the president do his job. Figure out a way to raise the debt limit so that the United States does not default on the good faith and credit of the United States. But what happens if we do default? Well, first, government will default if we cannot raise the debt ceiling. The government could not pay interest or principal on its debt. Social Security benefits will stop being paid. So if you are on Social Security, and a lot of people on fixed income, you're not going to get a check. You're not going to get a check. Federal workers will be either not paid or furloughed. Last time we went through this, they identified essential workers. And those essential workers had to work with the idea that, hey, listen, I'm working and hopefully I'll get paid. Automatically, you're not going to be able to get a paycheck when and if we default. I should say if. And then also we wouldn't meet in the other obligations, the parks, recreational parks, a lot of things that the federal government pay for. We're not going to be able to meet that because we have no money. It's not good. Not good. Second thing, global financial markets disruption. The U.S. Treasury bonds have been widely considered the safest investment in the world. A default by the United States would cause our people who invest in, we borrowing money, guys. We're borrowing money. Now think about it. Let's take it home. You borrowed money from a bank or a individual, and you come back to that person and you say, hey, listen, that bank can say, I can't pay you. I can't pay you. The first thing is they're going to, whoa, hold on a second. Why can't you pay me? Okay. Let's say it's a legitimate reason. The next thing you're going to say is, okay, Well, I'm going to charge you an additional interest rates because you're now more risky. You're more risky. Now, I'm going to still lend you money, but that preferred rate that you had when you was paying me on time, now I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to raise that by a couple of percentage points. So investors could get shaky and start raising the interest rates. And that would trigger a financial crisis. Just a little bit of raise can trigger, all hell is going to break loose. All hell would break loose. Economic recession. High interest rates make everything that we borrow more expensive. For businesses and consumers. It's going to reduce investments and spending, could slow down the economy and trigger a recession. Now, there's been a school of thought that we are nearing that without the debt ceiling. Chairman Powell thinks that we're not, but he's a majority. He is the minority opinion. The majority of people thinks that, we are going to enter into a mild recession. This is before this. If we cannot raise the debt ceiling, then we're talking about lack of capital, lack of access to capital, crazy interest rates from everything that business people need to grow their business. Working capital, that's going to dry up. The capital that you may get, you're going to have higher interest rates. So let's say we're investors, and we have a project that we want to build. It just so happened that we are working on at Carmena Construction, is that we're working on a project that is going to be a 12-unit condo. Actually going to be townhomes. Now, we negotiated with our partners and the bank that we're going to have access to capital. That's one, just access to capital, because no one builds projects at that scale with their own capital. You got to have access to capital. And that access to capital comes at a certain rate. Okay. So I'm going to just throw out some numbers. Let's say we have access to capital and we're paying 5% on our money. Okay. On that access. And we build the price of the home, access to capital, the cost, then profit, right? Now, to get a fair profit for the project is based on the access to capital. If that access to capital raises up, then the cost of the project raises. And so ultimately the cost to the consumer will raise. So even if you have access to that capital, it's going to cost the consumer so much more money because the interest rate is higher, artificially higher. Again, this is a self-inflicted wound. We've been raising the interest rate, as I mentioned to you guys, since the beginning of the bond, which is 1917. 1917, we've been raising it. Now, granted, we want to make sure we're spending the money correctly. I get it. We want to make sure that we're spending the money correctly. But we have been raising it. Damage to the U.S. creditworthiness. It could cause the U.S. creditworthiness to lending at a higher rate. It could diminish the U.S. capital, U.S. dollar's role as the world's reserve currency. Now that's a big thing. A lot of people have been sleeping on this actually. What does that really mean? It means that the U.S. dollar is the kind of the default reserve currency for the world. Everything is based on the U.S. dollar. A dollar benchmark, and based on that dollar, the country's currency is either above or below that, and that could change our ability to negotiate a lot of things. Let me give you an example. Now, if you are, I'm going to pull this. Actually, I'm going to pull this up. Let me share the screen with you guys, kind of have you understand this. This is a currency calculator. Let me add it to the stream. Now, when you go overseas, the first thing you want to do is you want to not, in most cases, you don't want to use a dollar. You want to use their currency in most cases. And I'm going to tell you why. So if you go to, I just pulled up a couple here. Now, if you go to a country or territory that's using the euro, for example, you can see that $1 American is not worth one of the euro. There, $1 American currently, and this is real time as of today, $1 American is worth 0.9068 euros. Okay, so we would go to a country that's using the euro, we want to use American dollars. Okay, because if we use there, it's going to cost us more. Let me switch it here and kind of give you a representation. One of their dollars is worth 1.1 of our money. Okay, so if you're ever in a European a country that is using the euro, you want to use the dollar. But let's say I'm in Australia. In Australia, one of our dollars is worth 1.47 of their money. So if you're there, you want to use their money. You don't want to use American dollar. Now, granted, they're gonna want you to, hey, listen, they're gonna want to say, hey, they're gonna give you a menu. Let me break this down for you guys. Let me give you guys some game. Let's do this. First thing they're going to do is they're going to say, hey, listen, they're going to give you a menu. I remember when my last place I was in, DR. And we didn't eat there. What we did was most of the time we ate on the ship. I was on a cruise and we was on a ship. So I would eat on the ship, but not eat in town. I guess the last place I went to that we ate was in town was Greece. So we went there and they gave us a menu and they said, hey, listen, they wanted to present. And they say the American dollar is what we want. We want you to buy in American dollars. We want to make sure that, the American currency, they gave this whole song and dance where, they're there for the tourists and, to make it easy for you guys. I know that some of you guys don't convert the money, and we want to use this menu is in American dollars. So what you don't want to do is that you want to check the conversion rate. Now, shout out to, I'm going to show you guys something. Shout out to Jamaica. One of my friends, Brazil, I should say. One of my friends just came back from Brazil. And she was, with her girlfriends. This is one of those girlfriend trips. And she was saying, hey, David, we had a great time. We was out on the town and we went to this great restaurant and we had such a great time. she was with a group of girls, and there was a couple of guys. So it was a group of them going out. Now you got to see, they kind of was dressed up. I saw the photos, kind of was dressed up. One of them was my niece, so she sent back a whole bunch of photos. They were looking good. Nice breezy outfits. They showed the menu, and they were saying, "Hey, listen, we had such a great time," and you could see it. It was a lobster plate. And I love seafood. I love seafood. So it had a big old lobster. And that lobster, it had all of the fixings. It had a potato, and it had, sauce and melting sauce. It was awesome. And he said, "David, we ate there, and then we had all these drinks, and we had such a great time. And then we went back to our hotel." And I said, "Well, that's awesome. How much did you pay? Because I'm curious." Well, it was American dollars, and we paid $100. I paid $100. Look, guys, they paid American dollars. 100 American dollars. Now, if $1 is $4, almost $5 in the Brazilian currency, almost $5. So that $100 meal was really $500. Was really $500 because they use American dollars when they should have been using the Brazilian real. Always check to see what the currency is wherever you are. But more importantly, we got to look at right here. If the credit ceiling is not raised, it could diminish the role of the US dollar as being the world's reserve currency. That means that everything that we buy could be affected by this. Guys, when you think about trade agreements, and when you think about, all of the things that we import, all of the things that we don't produce in the United States, and having that dollar start getting wonky, that's not good. That is really, really, really a nightmare scenario. Political repercussions. Now, I think really, I'm not sure that I want to make sure I use my words wisely, because I really think that both parties can understand. I try to understand the getting the mindset of both parties. I think both parties really want to do the right thing. I really do. Now, there are some bad apples. I get it. There are some bad apples, but I really think both parties are really trying to do their best to advance our agenda, America. I think that there is a case where we do need to bring down the debt. We do need to. But then there's also a case where we just coming out of a pandemic. We had to raise it then. We don't want a blank check, but we cannot default. It's just, look at this. Look at this, what I'm saying. If we default, there's nothing that I covered. Global market meltdown, government default, can't pay its bills. Immediately, that affects everybody who is on Social Security, potentially people that's on Social Security, federal workers. If you're getting money from the federal government, you may not receive that money. For sure, you're looking at an economic recession worldwide. This is the sneaker right here. is that the reserve U.S. dollars will probably weaken our role as the reserve currency, the world's reserve currency. Definitely would weaken that. So let's get back to the politics of it, because that's where we are. That's where we are. Is really how strong of a will does both parties have? Who's going to blink first? And should we even be playing this game? Should we even be playing this game? Now, a lot of people were saying, hey, listen, McCarthy is fighting for his job, the House Speaker. Now, remember, I want to give you kind of a political layout here. Democrats control the presidency, and the Senate. So we have a Democratic president and we have a democratically controlled Senate. Okay. Now the House is Republican control. And all of them have to agree, to the terms that are necessary to raise our debt limit, our debt ceiling. When McCarthy was voted in, he had a hard time getting to the majority, so that 218, so that he can be the House Speaker of the House. I think I did a report on that, so you guys can look at some of the reporting on that. But basically, I think it was 6 or 7 rounds that it took, and there was a lot of concessions that he had to make to be Speaker of the House. A lot. And so is he fighting for his job? Is he fighting for his job? A lot of people say yes. A lot of people saying that, hey, listen, he has to do this because he may not be Speaker of the House. But he may have a point. If his agenda is to reduce spending, and the Republican agenda is the official Republican agenda is to reduce government spending. That's their platform, among others. So if his ideology is to reduce government and reduce spending, how far do you push it? How far do you push it? Now, on the on the Democratic side, you say, hey, listen, we've raised this ceiling consistently since 1917. Since 1917, we've raised the ceiling. Why is it that all of a sudden we need to negotiate? Now the Republicans are going to say, "Hey, listen, we've negotiated before. It's common to negotiate." Democrats are saying, "Hey, listen, but there's been a lot of bills that the Democrats have passed when we had control of the House, where we didn't. It was what they're calling a clean bill, where we did not have to worry about trying to negotiate and reduce spending on certain things. And we just gave you a clean debt ceiling." So there's a tug of war going on. And the only people that's going to lose is us. Even if we get close to that drop dead date, which is next month. We're talking next month. If we get close to that, then they've already downgraded our rating. As I showed you before, they downgraded from a AAA to a AA approximately in 2011 because we got so close to not raising that debt. So even if we get close to not raising the debt, it still will have adverse repercussions for us. And the first person that's going to feel it is, guess what? It's going to be the United States populace. It's not going to be the millionaires and billionaires. They good. It's not going to be Congress, because guess what? I bet you they're going to pay themselves. I bet you they're going to pay themselves. It's going to be me. It's going to be you. It's going to be your mom. It's going to be your dad. It's going to be your kids. That's who's going to be hurt. It may be a program, that school that's going to be cut out. It may be Social Security that's going to be affected. If you have a government job, it may be your government job. You're going to be furloughed. When the interest rate raised, guess what? You think eggs were expensive now? You think Starbucks is expensive now? You think of that steak that you're buying is expensive now? You think of all these cosmetic items are expensive now? Wait till inflation hits. Real inflation. I've been overseas. I've seen third world countries, and I'm not saying the United States is the third world country. I am not. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. But I've seen double-digit, triple-digit inflations when I was in the military. I've seen what happens in the Philippines and other places. It is not pretty. So when these guys are saying, hey, listen, I'm going to play fast and loose with the debt. I may not raise the ceiling. You guys need to negotiate. We're going to make you, we're going to rake you over the coals. We're going to put these artificial conditions. They're playing with our livelihood. They're playing with my livelihood. They're playing with your livelihood. It is a serious game that they're playing, and one that I don't want to be part of that. I do not want to be part of that. But let's end this on a high note. We have raised that debt ceiling consistently since we issued those bonds in World War I in 1917. We raised it for world wars. Mainly, we raised it for social programs. We raised it for pandemics. It's dropped a little bit, but basically we've been raising that debt because that's debt ceiling because we do not take enough money in to pay our bills. We do not take enough money in to pay our bills. So we do need to get everybody, both parties kind of talking to each other now. They're going to meet next week. Actually, it's tomorrow. They're meeting tomorrow. President Biden called the 4 leaders in, the House majority leader, the House minority leader, the Senate majority leader, the Senate minority leader. He called all of them in to go to the White House to kind of try to hammer this out. And I sure hope that they can, because if they cannot, we're looking at not very good things happening out of that. We're not, and we are not in a position as a business owner, as a family owner, as a head of your household, for these guys to be playing it fast and loose over this debt ceiling. We're just not. The consequences are just too high. Guys, I hope I wish I had some more positive news for you. I will be covering this debt ceiling because it is super important. It is super important. So let's recap. Basically, we've been raising that debt ceiling since 2017. It's not been, really it started being contentious around the 2000s. They started playing this political football with the debt ceiling. And then ever since the 2000s, it's just been getting worse and worse and worse. I am hoping that tomorrow when they meet, that cooler heads prevail. There's been a lot of people are saying that when the cameras are off, they started acting right. The camera is what caused these, this performance. I hope they figure out a way to make this work. I really do. I really do hope they figure out a way to say, okay, you save some face, I save some face. We give you a clean debt ceiling like you want, Mr. President, but then you give us a handshake. You give us your word that we're going to sit down in earnest and talk about reducing the debt, reducing government spending. I think they can do that. What do you guys think? I think they can. So in the comments, what I want you guys to do is to write solutions of how both sides can make this a win-win. Because I've learned in real estate that it has to be a win-win. Both sides have to think that they have to win. So again, I want to thank you guys for coming in. I know that the debt ceiling is one of those topics where a lot of people don't give you that background and you don't know how important it is. And it really, really, really important. Guys, if the debt ceiling is not raised and we default, business as we know it is not going to be the same. It's never been done. No one can really predict how it will affect the U.S., but I can guarantee, guys, it won't be pretty. All right, guys. So thank you, Mr. Real Bravado Network. Thank you for coming in, brother. I know that you are a businessman and you are a family man. And I know that this debt ceiling is probably on the front of your mind. If not, I know that you are one of those guys that get it. You have a great station, a great show. I was dropped by your channel the other day. You did an awesome job. The Real Bravado Network with saluting KS, Mr. Kevin Samuels. You did an awesome job. You're a great content curator, guys. If you want to find out more about what Mr. Real Bravado Network is doing, go to his channel. He's doing a great job. Thank you for the 5 spot. I appreciate you. I really do. Christopher Williams, thank you, man. Thank you. You come on, you're again consistently in the chat, consistently supporting a brother. I want to thank you for everything that you're doing. I appreciate you. I appreciate both of you guys, brothers. Very stand up. I think that this debt ceiling is serious. We're going to talk about it. And we're going to see if these guys do the right thing. Let's see what we got here. I get sick and tired of them playing games with you're right. You are right. You are right. Ever since 2000, it's 2023. And they've been playing this political football with the debt ceiling since 2020 when the brother was in it, Barack Obama. They started, that's when it really went serious. And every year, almost every year consistently, they've been playing this back and forth. And you know what? The people who suffer is us. We are the ones who suffer. So I'm with you, brother. I get sick and tired of every year we have to get to play this political game about if we're going to raise the debt ceiling or not. And if we do raise it, what are the consequences? What are you going to give up to get it done? Thank you, Real Bravado. I appreciate you. Guys, thank you for dropping by. As always, this is entertainment purposes. This information given is not is not financial information. I am not your financial planner or advisor. Strictly information, and I want you to always, always stay grinding. And what? Wait, before we sign off, hey, good to see you, brother. Thank you, Doug. You snuck in right at the end. Thank you, Doug. MPA, another part of the Lead Attorney Mastermind group. Solid brother as always. Guys, hit the replay. We covered a serious topic tonight, but so important. So important. This debt ceiling, I cannot stress how important this is. And hopefully tomorrow, when all of the parties meet, when the president meets the Senate majority leader, the Senate minority leader, the House majority leader, the House minority leader, they can work this out. As always, guys, salute and stay grinding. I'll see you guys tomorrow.